Hello, it's Kathryn Dalziel and I'm going to paint a New Forest pony in the woods. I'm starting with a blank canvas and I'm trying to do it in an impressionistic style. I start off by filling in the background, and the background is mainly green because there's no sky. It's all in the trees. I'm using a teal blue with a yellow ochre and titanium white. When it gets closer to the foreground, I use cadmium yellow instead of the yellow ochre. So that brings the foreground forward. Putting in the trees. They're tall beeches and they look fairly black. Although I'm not using black, I'm using a mixture of French ultramarine and burnt umber. It's really sketching with a paintbrush at this stage. And you can change it, move it around and paint over it when you're using paint as thin as this. I've thinned the paint with a medium. It's a mixture that is made up ready for you. And the mixture is, if you use it in the studio, I use basically linseed oil and terps, distilled turpentine, the sort that you get in an art shop, not the stuff you'd use for decorating a house. Same goes for my brushes. I always wash them in a good quality turpentine because I want my brushes to last a long time. I'm just putting in the branches that are under the trees. There's a lot of debris on the forest floor, and the shadows on the left hand side. That sort of pile is a tree, I think, that's fallen down. I'm putting the pony in, and I'm using the same mixture but just a bit more blue than brown, and I'm trying to do this quite quickly. The horse is just walking straight towards us. It was her colour that really made me want to make it an impressionistic painting, because she's a dapple grey. Although she has a white face, she does have some grey markings on it. And she's quite a pretty forest pony. She looked very well. It looks like a ghost. But I will put the markings on her face and she won't look quite so ghost-like. The trees that are right in the background, I've just watered down with a bit more medium and maybe added a little white to them. The rule is that if you put anything light in the foreground, like a cadmium yellow, it comes forward, or like a bright red, it comes forward, and the more muted shades fall back, so the blues and the mauves go backwards. So if you're doing the green of the trees, you have to fade the colours back so they're not too vivid in the background. Otherwise you end up with a very flat painting. I started off using the hog brushes and with rather large brushes, and I've now changed to a finer brush, a thinner brush, smaller head. I think I'm still using a hog, but you can go on to sables. Sables are very good for blending if you want to blend, but I'm not particularly interested in blending this painting as I'm going to make it an impression rather than a detailed drawing or painting of a horse. Find it easier to work with several brushes, keeping my light brushes for all the light paint. I always use white with nothing else, just keep those brushes for white, and I use the darks with a different brush. Otherwise you get muddy colours. And you'll see later on in the painting I'm probably holding quite a lot of brushes in my hand at the same time. I am left-handed, so I hold the brushes in my right hand and use them as I need. She has white socks, this little mare, and she is in foal, so she's a bit round in her tummy. Even though it's only September, there's a lot of leaves on the floor, on the ground. It must be late September, I think. I've added a bit of red ochre to some raw umber. So I'm using a mixture of browns, so I'm using burnt umber as well, and of course white, and maybe sometimes a little bit of blue, so it's quite a limited palette in this painting. If I take a while, it's because I'm mixing my colours. These are little holly bushes I'm putting in that are dotted around the forest floor. And I've used a sap green with some French ultramarine. And the further back I go, the more blue I make the green as blue recedes. There's a holly tree right behind her. The paler green is really because there's light shining through the trees, so you get lots of paler greens. And this brighter green I'm making now, it's got yellow, cadmium yellow in. That is more in the foreground, so I can put that in. It's closer than the lighter greens and the more muted greens and the bluer greens. It's quite a difficult balance because some trees are naturally a darker green, like the holly. However, it's just as far forward almost as this bright green that's coming from the beech trees. There are quite a lot of holly trees in the wood. And I'm breaking up the trunks of the tree with leaves coming across at various intervals. Don't want any sort of hard lines. I'm working into the beech trees, picking out all the bright green pieces. I tend to do that if I've got a colour on my brush, just to use that colour where I can see it. There's some of this bright green at the foreground here as well. The pony's casting a shadow. I think the sun's a bit overhead, so the shadow's to the right of the pony mainly, and underneath the pony. So I'm putting it in with a raw umber and a little bit of blue. Shadows are sort of grey-blue colour, often. White socks of the horse. More shadow. Even holly bushes casting a bit of a shadow. There are always lots of shadows in a wood. Occasionally you get a glimpse of light coming through inside the wood, inside the trees. And some areas are brighter than others. Going back to do a bit more work on the horse. I try to work in natural light always, because electric light just doesn't work for me. I have good north light in my studio. Oh gosh, now I've got a wobble on my canvas. I'm afraid I knocked my camera. Sorry about that. I find electric light, even if you use daylight bulbs, really doesn't look the same. Good light's quite important in a painting, particularly if you're doing more traditional type painting or impressionistic painting, or painting that's realistic rather than imaginary. Trying to put the dots in on her face. They're sort of not really dots, they're just blended in together a bit. She's got quite a long, thick mane. Now you can see I've got the other brush ready so I can shape the ear the right way. I find doing this style of painting, the paint gets a bit thick and takes longer to dry. Because you're literally dabbing the paint on. Just gradually building up the colours and the depth of the shadows. I put quite a bit of blue and brown in together here to get the shadows of the trees. And I might lighten it up again later. It's a beginner's mistake is not to put enough darks in the shadows. You need the darks in the shadows just so you can have something light against it to give the painting depth. So you can go darker than you think you can go with your colours. Putting more of the dapples in as well. Most New Forest ponies, or most ponies and horses, if they're grey, they start off black and they gradually go lighter. And you can see her legs are black and her mane's black. She's going lighter in other places. It's looking very dark now, but I will lift it up a bit in a minute. So basically just work into it till you're satisfied. I rubbed it back and because I got a bit heavy there, so I rubbed it back and started putting in more of the definition. Because though it's impressionistic, I want people to be able to see some of the lines of the horse. And where the light's catching on her, she does look paler. I think the video is about 38 minutes long, 38 to 39 minutes long. So at any of these stages, if you want to fast forward, please do. Because some people like to see every stage, so I try not to cut too much out. But a lot of it's very repetitive. I'm just trying to show the leaves, and the leaves are falling on the ground, and in places they're lighter and other places they're darker, depending on the light catching them. And I find this quite therapeutic, doing this. And I try to make the marks slightly larger at the foreground, so you can see the size of the leaves. Really, it's just an impression. I like the New Forest, it's got such a rugged beauty. I've got plenty of paintings on my website. If you go to kathryndalziel.info, it's at the... I'll put it on the channel so you can see it, because my name's spelt a very funny way. It's actually, the pronunciation is DL, but I use it is sort of spelt Dalziel, DALZIEL. when you're starting off doing painting, if you're a beginner, start on a smaller canvas. Don't give yourself too big a task. I'm putting the light in the trees. The light sort of catches on the trees as it comes through the leaves of the canopy, the trees. You could do the same painting in acrylic if you preferred. I never use acrylics because I don't particularly get on with them because they dry at a different rate from oils. So I'm so used to oils, I prefer them. But I do watercolours sometimes. I'm just showing you what I do when I rub some out when I'm not satisfied. Just a bit of kitchen roll. It's sometimes a good idea to just do a practice piece. Something you see, something very simple. Just to get a feel of your brushes and your paints and how they react on a canvas. And be bold, don't be frightened of it because it's easy enough to change things if you want. I've got to the stage now I'm just putting in a few details, a few of the branches overhead. And some of the lights coming through. Some of the brighter greens that come forward. Do you see how much that jumped forward when I put that brighter green? And quite a lot of bits of this bright green because we have a lot of ferns in the forest. And they're all this bright green until they go brown for bracken. And just moved it forward in the easel so I can finish it off and see the top of it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please will you like it and share it. That's if you do. Thank you for watching, and happy painting. I'm looking forward to the summer when we can go out in the warmer weather.